It's 3 a.m. on a Saturday morning in Lagos, Nigeria. While most churches in the city will wake up in a few hours to prepare for Sunday service, thousands of people are already flooding into a massive auditorium. They're not early, they're right on time. Because for them, the Sabbath isn't Sunday, it's Saturday. And this distinction, this single theological choice made over a century ago, might just be the reason their church is exploding while others are emptying. In 2024, Christianity is facing what many are calling an existential crisis. In the United States, the number of people identifying as Christian has dropped from 78% in 2007 to just 64% in 2021. The United Kingdom tells an even starker story. Less than half the population now identifies as Christian, down from nearly 72% just 2 decades ago. Mainline Protestant denominations are closing churches at an alarming rate. The United Methodist Church lost over 2,000 congregations in just 2 years. Catholic churches across Europe are being converted into apartments, bookstores, and nightclubs. The pews are emptying, the buildings are aging, and the faithful are aging even faster. But walk into a Seventh-day Adventist church anywhere in the world, and you'll see something completely different. Young families, teenagers who actually want to be there, a vibrant energy that seems out of place in an era of religious decline. The numbers tell a story that defies the trend. While Christianity as a whole is contracting in the West, the Seventh-day Adventist Church has grown from about 10 million members in 1990 to over 22 million today. That's more than doubling in just 3 decades. Every single day, the denomination adds approximately 3,500 new members. That's roughly one person every 25 seconds around the clock. The question isn't just how they're growing, it's why everyone else is shrinking while they're thriving. Welcome to Professor Archive, where we dig deep into the stories that shape our world. Before we continue this investigation into one of the most counterintuitive religious phenomena of our time, let me ask you something. Where are you watching this from, and what time is it right now? Drop a comment below. I'm genuinely curious about our global audience, and I read every single one. And if you find value in these deep dives into history and culture, consider leaving a super thanks. It genuinely helps us continue producing this kind of in-depth content. The story begins in a farmhouse in 1844 with one of the greatest disappointments in American religious history. William Miller, a Baptist preacher from New York, had convinced somewhere between 50,000 and 100,000 followers that Jesus Christ would return to earth on October 22, 1844. He'd done the math. He'd studied the prophecies in the book of Daniel. He was certain. Families sold their farms. People quit their jobs. They gathered on hillsides in white robes, waiting for the sky to split open. October 22nd came and went. Jesus didn't return. The sun rose on October 23rd over thousands of devastated believers. History would call it the Great Disappointment. Most of Miller's followers abandoned their faith entirely. They'd been humiliated, bankrupted, socially ostracized. But a small remnant, maybe a few thousand people, refused to give up. They believed Miller had been right about something, just wrong about what would happen on that date. And from this tiny, embarrassed, stubborn group emerged the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Among these early believers was a 17-year-old girl named Ellen Harmon, who would later become Ellen G. White. Frail, uneducated, suffering from health problems after being struck in the face with a rock as a child, she seemed an unlikely prophet. Yet she claimed to receive visions from God. At first, people dismissed her, but her visions were different from the typical religious ecstasies of the time. They were practical, detailed, specific. She saw not just spiritual truths, but health principles, educational methods, even agricultural techniques. One of her most influential visions came in 1863 about health reform. At a time when doctors were still bleeding patients and prescribing mercury for ailments, Ellen White was promoting what sounded radical: a plant-based diet, fresh air, exercise, clean water, and abstinence from alcohol and tobacco. Medical professionals mocked her. But here's the twist: she was right. Adventists who followed these principles started living longer, healthier lives, and people noticed. By the early 1900s, Adventists had established Battle Creek Sanitarium in Michigan, which became the most famous health resort in America. Under the direction of Dr. John Harvey Kellogg, yes, that Kellogg, it attracted the wealthy elite. Henry Ford, Thomas Edison, and presidents came for treatment. Kellogg invented cornflakes there as a health food. His brother, Will Keith Kellogg, turned it into a commercial empire. The Adventist emphasis on health wasn't just spiritual. It was producing measurable, visible results. Fast forward to the 1950s, and something remarkable happened that would cement the Adventist health message in scientific literature. Researchers from Loma Linda University in California began a massive study of Adventist health outcomes. What they found was staggering. Adventist men lived on average 7.3 years longer than other California men. Adventist women lived 4.4 years longer. The rates of heart disease, cancer, and diabetes were dramatically lower. This wasn't faith healing or miracle claims. This was hard data published in peer-reviewed journals. The famous blue zones. Research by Dan Buettner identified 5 places in the world where people live the longest, healthiest lives. One of them is Loma Linda, California, the only blue zone in the United States, and it's the Adventist community there that makes it special. The secret? The same principles Ellen White promoted in 1863. Plant-based diet, rest, exercise, community, and purpose. But health consciousness alone doesn't explain explosive growth. Plenty of health-focused movements have come and gone. The Adventist phenomenon runs deeper, and it has everything to do with how they spread their message. In 1874, a young Adventist named John Nevins Andrews boarded a ship to Europe. He was the first official Adventist missionary sent overseas. He had no funding, no infrastructure, no local contacts. He took his 2 children, his wife had died, and a trunk full of religious literature. Within a decade, there were Adventist communities across Europe. By 1900, Adventists were in Africa, Asia, and South America. The strategy was brilliantly simple. Send educated, committed individuals into new territories. Have them start by offering practical help, medical clinics, schools, literacy programs. Build trust. Then share the message. The Adventist Church became one of the largest Protestant educational systems in the world, operating over 9,000 schools, colleges, and universities today. They run one of the largest Protestant healthcare systems, with over 200 hospitals and sanitariums worldwide. In places where governments had failed to provide basic services, Adventists showed up with doctors, teachers, and genuine commitment to stay. In rural Tanzania, I'll tell you about a clinic that changed everything. In 1965, an Adventist doctor named Harold Replogle arrived in Hiri, a remote village where the nearest hospital was a 2-day walk away. Infant mortality was devastating. Malaria, malnutrition, and preventable diseases killed children regularly. Replogle didn't just preach. He built a hospital. He trained local nurses. He stayed for decades. Today, that hospital serves over 300,000 people in the region. And the Adventist Church in Tanzania? It has grown from a few hundred members in the 1960s to over 500,000 today. This pattern repeated across Africa, Asia, and Latin America. Practical service first, message second. But the message always came, and it came with a lifestyle that actually worked. Here's where it gets interesting. While many Christian denominations have become more flexible, more accommodating to modern culture, Adventists have largely maintained strict standards. No work on Saturday, no alcohol, tobacco, or recreational drugs. No unclean meats, pork, shellfish, anything biblically prohibited. Modest dress, conservative entertainment choices. In an age of moral relativism, this should be driving people away, but it's not. Research by sociologists Rodney Stark and Roger Fink might explain why. In their book, Acts of Faith, they argue that strict churches grow while lenient churches decline. The reason is counterintuitive. High-cost religions create more committed members. When joining requires sacrifice, giving up your Saturday for worship, changing your diet, abandoning certain pleasures, you're making a serious investment, and people value what costs them something. These members are more likely to attend regularly, donate generously, and actively recruit others. Meanwhile, churches that made everything easy, that asked nothing difficult of members, found their pews emptying. Why? Because if something costs you nothing, it's worth nothing. If your faith requires no sacrifice, demands no change, offers no distinct identity, why bother? You can be spiritual without the inconvenience of church. Adventists also made a bet on education that's paying massive dividends. The denomination operates universities in nearly every world region. Andrews University in Michigan, Loma Linda University in California, Adventist University of Africa in Kenya, Montemorelos University in Mexico. These aren't just Bible colleges, they're fully accredited institutions offering medicine, engineering, business, and liberal arts. They produce doctors, teachers, scientists, and entrepreneurs who carry their faith into professional life. And here's the crucial part. Adventist schools don't just serve Adventists. In many developing countries, Adventist schools are among the best available. Middle-class families of all faiths send their children there. These students may not convert, but they're exposed to the Adventist lifestyle and message. Some eventually join. Their families see the positive influence. The schools become evangelism engines. The church also pioneered media evangelism in ways that seem prescient now. In 1929, decades before televangelism became mainstream, Adventists launched the radio program Voice of Prophecy. In 1956, they started It Is Written, one of the first religious television programs. Today, the Hope Channel broadcasts in over 70 languages, and Adventist World Radio reaches some of the most remote areas on Earth in over 100 languages. But perhaps the most powerful growth factor is also the most basic. Adventists actually believe they have urgent news to share. The name itself, Seventh-day Adventist, proclaims two core convictions. The seventh day, Saturday, is the true Sabbath, and Christ's advent return is imminent. These aren't abstract theological concepts. They're urgent realities that demand action. If you genuinely believe Jesus is coming back soon, you don't treat evangelism as an occasional activity. It becomes existential. Adventists believe that before Christ returns, the world must hear a specific message, the three angels' messages from Revelation 14, warning humanity to worship the Creator and avoid the mark of the beast. Whether you agree with this theology or not, the psychological impact is profound. It creates a sense of mission, of cosmic importance to everyday witnessing. This urgency manifests in remarkable ways. The Adventist Church dedicates a higher percentage of its budget to mission work than virtually any other denomination. Nearly 20% of the world's Adventist members are church employees, pastors, teachers, doctors, administrators, a staggering ratio that reflects institutional commitment to spreading the message. And they're strategic about where they focus. While many Western denominations have largely abandoned traditional missionary work, uncomfortable with its colonial overtones, Adventists have doubled down on the global South. Today, only about 8% of Adventists live in North America. The explosive growth is happening in Africa, where membership has grown from about 500,000 in 1970 to over 8.5 million today. In Latin America, where there are over 4.5 million members, and in Asia, particularly in the Philippines, India, and Myanmar. The Democratic Republic of Congo alone has over 1 million Adventists. Brazil has nearly 2 million. The Philippines has over 1 million. These aren't nominal members who show up for Christmas and Easter. Adventist churches in these countries are packed every Saturday with engaged, active believers who tithe faithfully and participate in church-sponsored programs throughout the week. What's particularly fascinating is how Adventism succeeds in cultures that resist Western Christianity. In many parts of Africa and Asia, Christianity is viewed with suspicion as a colonizer's religion. But Adventism, with its emphasis on Old Testament law, Saturday Sabbath, and dietary restrictions, resonates with traditional cultures that value law, ritual, and dietary purity. In some Muslim-majority areas, Adventists find common ground through shared health practices and respect for religious law. In Rwanda, still healing from the 1994 genocide, Adventist churches have grown dramatically. Why? Because during the genocide, while some church buildings became sites of massacre and some clergy participated in the killing, Adventist institutions generally maintained their integrity. The Adventist University of Central Africa sheltered both Hutu and Tutsi refugees. Adventist medical facilities treated victims regardless of ethnicity. This moral witness, this living out of principles under pressure, created credibility that survived the ultimate test. But let's address the elephant in the room. How much of this growth is genuine conversion versus biological growth? Critics point out that Adventist families tend to be larger, and if you're simply counting children born into the faith, that's not evangelism. That's reproduction. Fair point. Except the data shows something different. The church's growth rate significantly exceeds what birth rates alone could explain. And in developed countries where Adventist families are smaller, the church is still growing through conversion. In the United Kingdom, where Christianity is collapsing, the Adventist church has grown by over 300% since 1970. In secular France, Adventist membership has increased steadily. In Germany, while the Protestant and Catholic churches lose tens of thousands of members annually, the Adventist church adds members. These aren't high birth rate populations. These are converts, often immigrants from Africa, the Caribbean, and Latin America, who find in Adventism a Christianity that's vibrant, demanding, and alive. There's also the retention question. What good is rapid growth if you're losing members just as fast through the back door? Here, Adventism faces real challenges. Studies suggest that up to 40–50% of young Adventists leave the church. That's significant. But here's the perspective. With that kind of attrition, the church is still doubling membership every few decades. Imagine the growth if they retained even 70% of their youth. And they're working on it. The church has invested heavily in youth programs, university campus ministries, and creating space for questioning and doubt within a conservative framework. Adventist colleges employ theologians who engage contemporary biblical scholarship. There's internal diversity. Progressive Adventists in California debate conservative Adventists in Africa over women's ordination, LGBTQ inclusion, and creation science versus evolution. These tensions could split the denomination, or they could indicate a living, dynamic tradition, wrestling with modernity rather than ignoring it. Let me share a story that illustrates Adventist appeal in the modern world. In 2015, a successful tech executive in Silicon Valley named Marcus became curious about health optimization. He tried various diets, tracking everything with apps and wearables. He discovered through his research that the Loma Linda Adventist population had extraordinary health outcomes. Intrigued, he visited an Adventist church in San Jose. He wasn't religious, he'd been raised without faith, but he was drawn to the holistic lifestyle. He started attending, initially for the health community, but he stayed for something unexpected: purpose. In his tech job, he optimized ad algorithms to increase click-through rates. It paid incredibly well, but it felt empty. The Adventist community offered something different: a worldview where health, work, rest, and spirituality integrated into a coherent whole. Within a year, he was baptized. Today, he runs a nonprofit providing tech education in underserved communities. His story isn't unique. The Adventist message resonates with people searching for structure in chaos, meaning in materialism, and community in isolation. Modern secular society offers freedom, but freedom without purpose feels like drift. Adventism offers a comprehensive life system: when to rest, what to eat, how to relate to others, what ultimate purpose drives everything. For people overwhelmed by infinite choice, this clarity is attractive. Now, we should acknowledge the controversies. Ellen White's prophetic authority remains contentious, even among Adventists. Some of her writings have been shown to borrow heavily from other authors without citation, what we'd call plagiarism today. Her defenders argue that prophets aren't journalists. They're messengers who communicate divine truth through available human language and concepts. Critics say it undermines her claimed inspiration. The debate continues. There are also cultural challenges. Adventism's conservative stance on gender roles, sexuality, and biblical interpretation creates tension, particularly in Western contexts where these are flashpoint issues. The World Church's refusal to approve women's ordination, despite some regional conferences ordaining women anyway, has created painful division. Some predict schism. Others believe the Church is large and flexible enough to hold these tensions. But here's what's undeniable. In an age where religious institutions are hemorrhaging members, credibility, and cultural influence, the Seventh-day Adventist Church has found a formula that works. Practical service wins trust. High demands create commitment. Clear mission generates urgency. Global vision transcends cultural barriers. Health emphasis produces visible results. Educational investment builds leadership. And the belief that they possess critical truth drives tireless evangelism. Whether you accept their theology or not, their growth demands explanation. They're doing something right in an era where most religious institutions are doing things wrong, or at least ineffectively. They've avoided the twin traps that doom other churches, becoming so strict that they repel potential members or becoming so lenient that they lose distinctive identity. They've maintained doctrinal conservatism while adapting methods to contemporary contexts. They use modern media without being consumed by it. They engage culture without being captured by it. And perhaps most importantly, they still believe their message matters cosmically, not just personally. In an age of therapeutic spirituality focused on individual wellness, Adventists preach that cosmic truth and humanity's ultimate destiny hang in the balance. That urgency translates into action, and action produces growth. The lessons here extend beyond any single denomination. People hunger for meaning, for community, for purpose that transcends self-interest. They'll sacrifice for causes they believe matter. They'll commit to communities that demand commitment. They'll embrace systems that actually deliver promised benefits. The churches that thrive understand these human needs. The churches that decline forgot them or abandoned them in pursuit of relevance that turned out to be irrelevance. So while headlines chronicle Christianity's decline in the West, while ancient cathedrals become event venues, while denominations split and shrink, that Saturday morning crowd in Lagos keeps growing. The Adventist hospitals in rural Africa keep healing. The schools in Latin America keep teaching. The radio programs in remote Asia keep broadcasting. And every 25 seconds, somewhere in the world, someone decides that this message, this community, this demanding and comprehensive way of life is worth joining. The question for observers isn't whether you agree with Adventist theology. The question is what their success reveals about human needs in the modern world, and what declining institutions might learn from those still growing. Because whatever else we might say about the Seventh-day Adventist Church, they've cracked a code that eludes most others: how to grow a demanding religious movement in an age of declining religiosity. Thank you for watching Professor Archive. If this deep dive into religious demographics and institutional success fascinated you, make sure you're subscribed because we explore these counterintuitive historical and cultural phenomena every week. What's your profession, by the way? I'm curious who watches these long-form documentaries. Let me know in the comments. And if you gained something valuable from this investigation, that super thanks button genuinely helps us continue this work. Until next time, keep questioning, keep learning, keep exploring the stories behind the headlines.